hope you can hear me. Welcome to this OCP conference here in Prague. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm excited also to share, on behalf of Google, how we drive the next generation of net zero at scale. So a little bit about myself. My name is Jens Peter Clausen, go by the name JP. I have a background in engineering and also within leadership, and specifically around innovation when it comes to technology. So I have an MBA, which I'm very proud about because it actually gave me some opportunities to think about how you actually innovate in big enterprises. I were fortunate to work with some of the big brand companies like Lego, Tesla, and now at Google. So I'm relatively new to the industry, so I'm also here to build network. I'm excited to be here and share our story. So first, everybody knows that the mission of Google is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible for everyone. We also want to become net zero at scale, and that means by 2030, we want everything to be net zero. The agenda today is how we actually are going to do this. It's of course not coming without any challenges when we talk about an hour-to-hour basis of being net zero. It's so much more difficult than thinking about offsetting your carbon as generally. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the three scope of emissions and how we actually are providing some few examples of that. And then we want to make sure that we are collaborating in the industry, specifically also about OCP, and continue the journey of contribution. So first about our commitment to make sure that our services are reliable for all users and customers around the world, and ensure that this is requiring a lot of clean energy to do so. So if we think about Google specifically, we are one of the cleanest cloud in the industry. And if you think about what that actually means in numbers, then we actually signed up for more than 60 wind and solar agreements around the world that is new to the grid since 2010. And since 2020, we actually issued $5.75 billion in sustainability bonds that people can apply to. And then in 2030, we want to enable additional 5 gigawatt of renewable investments to the grid. Every Google services, as you know, consumes a small amount of energy, or some amount of energy. So with trillions of searches every year, with YouTube that some of you are probably using, you see billions of hours of videos and upload billions of views. With Google Maps that have monthly more than 1 billion active users, and with 4 trillion photos stored in our Google Photos, and every week adding 28 billion new photos to that database, it all adds up really. So of course we need to take that seriously because we are definitely consuming energy. So data centers never sleep. We want to make sure that with equipment that is out there performing like computing tasks every day, we want to make sure that that's done in a reliable way. We want to make sure that that's safe and also without interruption. The challenge at hand is that with solar and wind and even utility grids that is not all time available, you need to figure out how you actually become, on one hand, reliable, and the other hand, renewable, and specifically net zero. So how do we solve that complex problem? Well, first of all, we want to make sure that we learn the utmost, specifically here from Europe, about energy efficiency. So example, from 2010 to 2018, we experienced in the cloud computing more than 2,600% increase. But at the same time, we only increased the energy consumption with 10%. And that's because we relentlessly focused on energy efficiency. So if we look at the PUE, we are considered as being the world leading when it comes to the PUE for our data centers. You can see the graphs up here that we actually are tracking around 1.1. And we're very proud of this, and we'll continue that journey to make it even more efficient. Also, We heard a little bit earlier today that our friends in the industries, in other hyperscalers, have similar agendas about being net zero in 2030. The good news is that we actually achieved 100% renewable energy as a major milestone in 2017 already. And we also declared quite soon thereafter that we wanted to be net zero in 2030. So we want to do that all places at all time. And we're talking about an hour-by-hour basis. And I think that's where the challenge gets so much more difficult. We also want to acknowledge that we are using water to cool down our data centers. We want to replenish that water with 120% replenishment, but we think that water plays an important role in our fight against CO2, because the fact is that water-cooled data centers are 10% more efficient and thereby 10% less CO2 polluting than other data centers. And we want to acknowledge that we need more technology development so we can actually offset this going forward, right? So in 2021, water cooling helped us reduce roughly 300,000 tons of CO2, so it matters. So also, I want to kind of like also address, of course, energy efficiencies and how we actually are thinking about our offset, but also think about the three scope of emission, which is extremely important for all of us. As a recap for those who are not familiar with this, which I think most of you are, then scope 1 is the direct emission that you can control. Scope 2 is basically the indirect emissions coming particularly from utilities, and then all other emissions are basically around the supply chain. As we saw today, some data that we are definitely like also focusing heavily on scope 3, because we also see that the similar data as Meta showed today, that there is actually a lot of carbon tied up in supply chains. So some examples of the different scopes and how we work with them. So first of all, geothermal. We actually signed a large contract in US, in Nevada, where we basically are looking into the next generation of geothermal that is using new technologies. And if we unlock some of that potential, we will, of course, move that to other locations where geothermal is possible. We also are continuing to sign more PPAs, which is basically a good example is in Finland, where we are combining wind and nuclear from the grid, and we actually are achieving 94% net zero hour by hour from the utility. In Denmark, where we have our newest data center constructed, we are seeing like from the Danish grid combined with solar that we have an hour by hour base of 90% net zero. So it really matters when it comes to working together with utilities and also investing heavily in both geothermal, solar and wind. If we think about meeting this 24/7 carbon-free energy, it requires more. So since 2018, we actually also have used machine learning to predict and optimize the output of, for instance, wind, but you can actually use that for other renewable sources as well. So with our DeepMind system, we actually predict how the wind is blowing the next 36 hours, and we can collaborate with the utility grids and thereby optimize again, the CO2 footprint of that. Also, we have one of the most powerful networks in the world, so we actually have the ability to move IT loads around, and that's where you can see on the picture below. So we actually are thinking about, or not thinking, but we actually are doing our carbon intelligent computing program that moves load to basically where the sun is shining and where the wind is blowing. And we can actually do that because, again, we have reasonably powerful internet connections between our data centers and out to all of you. For scope 1, we also have some examples to share, and specifically about, if a data center is affected by a power outage, we want to switch to backup immediately in seconds, and we call that standby power. So in Belgium is a good example where we actually installed 10,000 solar panels and combined that with battery technology to make sure that we designed for the minimum amount of generators. because the best thing you can do is to eliminate, of course, our diesel gensets. Batteries also have this benefit that it actually strengthening the grid and the connectivity with the grid, so we can actually participate in grid services. And also the remaining gensets, we are already running some tests about HVO fuel that we're going to replace as soon as it's getting available for purchase in different countries. Scope 3 is an important one, and you may say the best data center is the one you don't build. So utilize whatever you have already invested in is number one, right? But we also think that we actually have some opportunities of thinking about existing infrastructure that's already built. And one of the examples we have is in Hamina, Finland, where we actually took an old paper mill and retrofitted it to a data center. So we actually reduced quite a bit of Scope 3 by doing so. So we repurposed the electrical substation, the seawater cooling tunnel, and we even repurposed the sauna that was out there. Also, data centers, of course, when we have to build more because of need of capacity, we are going to think about designing for first principle. And think about it, if you take like a data center, you put it on a scale and you see how much it's weighing, right? And you can actually start to think about how much of this mass is actually needed and how much can you take out. And that's actually some exercise that we are seriously running to make sure that we are eliminating as much as material as possible, because then we have to run less material through the supply chain. The one material that we are then using, of course, we're trying to find out whether we can use recycled or even substitute with, for instance, engineered wood for structures and so on. So empowering consumers and ecosystems. So all data center stakeholders have to work together for this challenge. You know, on one hand, you want net zero, and you want to rely on variable energy sources. And on the other hand, you want to have reliability for everybody 24/7. So how do those two meet? Well, Google cannot solve this challenge alone, so we need your help. We believe that data center have to be affordable, carbon-free, reliable, and help users around the world. But we also believe that we should participate in all of this OCP work with transparency, make sure that we are working with stakeholders to make a global impact. And we also want to make sure that we are continuing to share our learning with the open source approach for innovation, and also enabling partnerships so we can solve those complex problems together. So we are poised to success with this OCP framework, so I definitely want to continue to contribute and make sure that we are working on this in partnerships. So we partner through a time of tremendous change and growth that we all are witnessing. We, as a company, is actually serving on the OCP board of directors, and we co-lead several of the OCP projects. So we are definitely engaged. Last year alone, we made like 18 of the 74 total contribution, which is more than 20%. So we are contributing to the party, if you will. For security, I'm also excited that the Calyptra have reached the 0.5 milestone, and also the RTL code base have reached the 0.8 version of the Chip Alliance. And that's really important milestones for us, and we believe that moving this forward is important for the industry. This tremendous progress is kind of like only after 6 months, and it's in partnership with AMD, Microsoft, and NVIDIA. So we are very pleased of this collaboration. There is a warning, however. The climate change and the global warming is real. We know that it's now we have to act. We can actually act together, and we are planning on actually starting up a huge investment in Europe about our innovation center, and everybody who wants to join can really join this effort, where we want to work with private and public institutions based on local needs in a European collaboration. And we look actually forward to work with you and innovate with you. And the barcode here is real, so you can scan it and you can actually get some information about how you can be a part of this. We again believe that those challenges need to be solved in a team, and we want to create the framework for that. We also want to acknowledge that we have been working with iMason, the Climate Accord, and we actually just published a paper that was authorized by Microsoft, Meta, and AWS, and ourselves in Google, that describe how we want to deliver more green concrete and talk about more embedded carbon in concrete in generally, because it's quite significant amount of the CO2 footprint. You can read a lot more about it in the paper that was just released. So again, sign this paper, make sure that we are facilitating more green concrete in construction, so we can at least reduce the amount of CO2 that is possible. Finally, to continue to support sustainability, please hang around. There is a panel discussion just right now after me with one of my Google colleagues that is going to talk about sustainability more. And also join tomorrow where Googlers in our company are delivering more on sustainability and security in generally. So I want to thank you for your attention. I hope that you kind of like enjoy the presentation. We have, of course, a ton of more data behind all this that I will be more happy to share in some networking discussion later on. So thank you so much.